Hi, I'm Lukasz. I did open source a long time ago, and then I joined the company called OpenAI. I didn't do much open source in that company, but I want to talk about two things. So my colleague Ilya Sutskever had this talk with Lukasz, and he said, you know, we're in the new age of research, and I certainly believe this very much. So, you know, when the original transformers came up, all of AI was open source. You published everything, your code was in the open. It was nice and easy, and it was fun, but it also took 8 GPUs to run. So it was easy to make it open because, you know, Google did not believe this can be of any value or, you know, problem to their search engine. So now we're in a different world, right? It's kind of hard to convince a company like OpenAI to put things in the open because there is billions of dollars at stake and it could be dangerous to the company and so on and so forth. So nobody's gonna like put their frontier model with the whole recipe out in the open. And the recipe also changes, right? That's why we are a research team and we work on it. But there is something new coming. And I like to talk about this Waymo. I talk about it all the time, so I'll just do this quickly. Waymos are great, right? They can take you anywhere in San Francisco. They can even take you to Palo Alto. They won't take you to Berkeley, though. And if you think of a human driver who's driven for 10 days and can drive all around San Francisco, he can drive you to Berkeley or Sacramento, right? Like, there is no difference. Why? Nobody would even think that, oh, well, you know, it's different if you need to drive in New Delhi, but around here, it's all kind of the same. So it's within a level of generalization that we basically don't think it's any different, right? But of course, to AI, these things are still different. So there is still an enormous gap in the ability to generalize that people have, which is, I have a little daughter, she learned skiing recently. I never realized it takes kids 2 days, you know, and then they ski. It doesn't take robots 2 days. It takes years and years for a lab, right, and a lot of help. The same, to some extent, applies to language models, except they hide it better because they know all of the internet and they're trained on a lot of data and so on. But there is this problem, and okay, we knew for decades, right, that this is the main problem in AI. We've made great strides in it, like the current LLMs generalize better than 10 years ago and so on and so forth, and reasoning models are much better at it even. But I think there is a whiff in the air that there are research ideas that you can do something about it, which means, just to make you realize that everything you see today, like Codex, Claude Code, all the talks you're gonna see today are nothing in comparison to what's coming. Now, we have not figured it out yet, but you can feel the whiff in the number of labs started at each day, which is, you know, I think last week, 10 new labs, David Silver, like there's a ton of people. It's very clear, and it happened before any invention. It's not like, you know, you have like this one person, like in a big community like AI, you can see that researchers are feeling like this is the time we seem to have enough knowledge, like something's gonna crack. You don't know if it's gonna crack. It's a research problem. It might not even be this year. It doesn't operate at the speed of agents, right? But agents certainly help, and we'll get to this. When things crack, you'd really want, and you could tremendously benefit from having open source projects run the new paradigm. Research and open source are great for each other. It's always been like this because you can, like when you have a new idea, you don't know which form or shape it should take. It's great to spread it out. It's great to have a lot of people trying and testing and figuring out. It also gives you feedback because, you know, if you're doing it on your own, you can convince yourself to any idea you like, right? You just push it enough. But if you have a broad community, the really best ideas are the ones that people can make work quickly. So I think this year, it's starting this new age of research, which could be amazing for open source. But then, so we are truly on the brink of this new research age. But then there is something that also happened, which is the agents, right? At least I stopped coding the way I used to code. Now I ask my computer to code for me, right? And sometimes it's great. Sometimes I ask it, you know, I love that I stopped coding because sometimes I ask it, like, change line 340 to this. It's still coding to some extent, but But sometimes I just ask it, run this run, and it runs it. Sometimes I tell it, summarize what we've done, and it writes a summary. These agents are amazing, and they do, for me, basically all of my coding. And they're going to do more and more. And I think they're also bringing a huge change to how software engineering is done. That's obvious, but also a huge change to what open source even means. Because what open source used to mean, right, is like, here is my GitHub repo. It's my repo, you can contribute. I remember my first bigger repo that was like just made by me. I was like, oh, this is fun, this is fun. And then like it started taking off, and there was like, I was fixing all the bugs. I wanted to reply to every issue every day. And then I went to sleep, woke up in the morning, and there was 450 issues, and that was it, right? I gave up on fixing stuff. So you need to deal, when you grow a bit, you need to deal with this onslaught of PRs, issues, the whole thing. You get discussions, you have exchanges, sometimes it gets tears. And then, of course, people who contribute really nice things, there is a credit to them, and sometimes they get jobs. There is a lot of credit that is passed through merit, and a lot of this merit is, I know how to code very well. So now, bad news, that merit is gone, because Codex can code better, and if it can't code better than you yet, it will very soon. So we'll need to find a new way. So I want to give you just an idea, but this is like, like the AI 2027 documents. Don't take this idea too seriously. It will certainly be different, but we need to start thinking about like, how does a open source repo look in the future? And I believe, like, there will be some code, but I don't believe you will actually want any humans to submit any code. Like, by now, I feel like humans doing code is like weird. You should leave the code to the agent. What you probably don't want is a log of the discussion that the human had with the agent. Now that is something we totally don't submit yet, but at my team, for example, it's much more valuable to know how people talked to Codex to get to the code than the code actually. You need to decrypt from the code what the people actually wanted, but people said it in the conversation. You just need to put it in a file and not lose it, because currently people just commit the code and not their conversations with the agents, which is absolutely crazy. It should be the other way around. So the new way of doing it will be your conversations are logged. But then it will not be only your conversations, because, for example, I hate the way Codex names variables. These names are like 60 characters long. I can't stand them. So I try to change it and tell it, hey, do this like this, and it does a little bit and then goes back. And then I gave up. But what you can have is every person, like for the agent, it doesn't matter whether it's on the master repo or a branch. It hasn't like us internalized the code. It's every time starts and goes search, and like it's context free when it starts. So we don't need to have a master. Every person can have their version of the repository. Like, I want to run this. This is a huge problem in machine learning research, because machine learning code becomes like this spaghetti thing of like, if, activation function this, then do this, if that, then do that. Oh, I want to add one more experiment. Oh, let's put an if here, if there. The code becomes, hyperparameters are like structured files of 7,000. And everyone was saying, oh, but you don't need it. You just have your own experiment. But then your own experiment is like, you have 17 files in your own folder. Nobody else can read it. Agents can solve it. You have your own repo, but the agent can, anyone who asks can get your stuff on their repo. Like, the whole transition does not need to be migrated through master and through like having a top version. It can be migrated through the agents synchronize between it. But how do they synchronize? Well, if they are to synchronize in some way, then they probably, I believe it's best for agents currently, to have a kind of a wiki or a design book. Like, agents don't necessarily need to synchronize to a master version of a code. They can, like, kind of a mold book. You have the log of the conversations and maybe like a summary of each one and a synthesis of how things look. Or like a news feed. recently this guy tried this thing on his repo, and he used this method and ran this, and that was the result. You can ask the agents to create the newsfeed, to summarize it, to append the newsfeeds, and all agents. So kind of Moltbook was an early vision of that. And then as the news spreads, you say, oh, look, this kind of seems relevant to what I'm doing. Maybe incorporate this. The agent just ports the code. So this is a very different view of a repo, right? But I think this is something where we'll be going. And then how will a community around something like this look? Well, you'll probably be asked not to code, right? But maybe you'll be asked to just read the news of what's happening. Like imagine a team of a few hundred people, like we have an OpenAI. There is, someone's done something every day, right? There's like this interesting part of this, that interesting part. You can almost think of it as a feed. Like inspired by Moltbook, we have actually an OpenAI book where the agents write what's happening. You can make it even better, right? And so maybe as a human, you kind of like basically just look through it and comment and talk. Maybe this is how community will look. And then of course your agent you'll say, oh, that's interesting, combine it with that, run it for me, and you'll see some early results on your box. But then in AI research, you need to run larger stuff. So you need some way, like imagine we get a GPU grant for the community, and there's many companies willing to do that. How do you choose what gets run at larger scale and what doesn't, right? And teams at companies have the same problem, right? And you have a manager to decide. And of course, ultimately, you'll always have some human to decide. But I do think that the feedback from agents, like agents are very good code reviewers. I think they can also be very good reviewers of how likely do you think these methods are to succeed? How much more information they will bring if we run this experiment? So maybe there is like some agent ranking of your proposals, which also means if you propose it and the agent's telling you, like maybe it's not worth running, you'll also get a feedback like, look, this is because of this and that and that. Well, that's quite enticing. Like, it's like research under like a really good supervisor of sorts. So I think that's how it may look. And then there is this, this nasty part of like credit assignment. We don't talk about it much because a lot of people in open source like just do things for fun. And then they're open and we get credit because maybe someone writes a paper and maybe Schmidhuber claims he did it 30 years ago and, someone gets a job somewhere and ultimately gets paid. And it's all fun, but maybe it will need to be a little bit more systematized. One nice thing is like large language models and agents are amazing at searching for identical ideas. Right, there were Erdős problems that were open and people were not closing them, and the agents found literature that in totally different language solves this problem. And so I think the one nice thing is like, you cannot claim something is new anymore when it's not really new. Like if Schmidhuber says I did it 30 years ago, your agent would have found it. If your agent hasn't found it, it's proof enough that it is probably actually new. So that's very good because then you can say, okay, I'm putting it out, but the agent said it wasn't anywhere before, so I claim credit for it. And then anyone who's using it, it should be fairly traceable. So you can say, like, look, this idea really came from me. So it's nice if you have this provenance without, having to debate people a lot. But then I do think that there may be a need for the community to think about open source ideas like, long time, there was this thing called GPL in open source. Somehow it's not very popular in AI circles, but imagine if some idea originates from the community, like a new SWI-mesh glue function that gives 20% C improvement to all transformers. It does feel like a company like OpenAI should maybe pay for it a little bit to the community. So there are two ways to basically do this. One is like you say the license is restrictive and you try to legally get some form of payment, which, by the way, I think the companies would be super happy to pay because the 20% gain, there's enough money to go around if the price is right. The other way is you could do this cryptographically. You could say, I run experiments on this exact baseline, but with my change that here I encode, but I'm not showing you. And it gives these improvements. And if you're interested, hey, let's get lawyers in a deal and I'll show you. But you can verify that there isn't change that gives exactly these results, and you can also verify that maybe only changes these blocks of a code. So it will be harder to scam, right? So you come with claims that are unwarranted. So there is a lot that can be done to credit as well because of the fact that things will be more verifiable. So there, as I said, this is just like one vision of things that may be coming. There's many other ways, and I'm quite sure we'll see a lot of new ways in this year. But change is coming, and I think it will be very exciting. I think there is a huge potential to both use these things to like have fun ways of coding and involve a lot of people and test a lot of ideas. But also, yeah, there's exciting research that may, you know, make AI look really interesting. So, but we'll need to build it, right? It's not there. A lot needs to be tried. So looking forward to seeing all of you, all of us try it out and see. Thank you.